Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Folks, welcome back to the Ageless Athlete Podcast. This is your host, Kush Khandelwal, broadcasting from San Francisco, California, bringing you stories of age-defying, genre-defying adventure athletes doing extraordinary things in the outdoors. It is gorgeous out. I did my physio this morning, stretched, and can't wait to get outside in a couple of hours. Are you ready to be inspired? Today, we have an ageless mountain biking phenom, Matt Eggleton. At 59 years young, Matt is defying age stereotypes by sending it harder than ever on the gnarliest downhill and enduro courses. But here is the surprising part. He did not even start mountain biking until his 40s. From bracing the pure stroke of wind in your face to cultivating a mindset that laughs in the face of supposed age limitations, throughout our talk, Matt drew from his military discipline to drop wisdom on the mindset, training, and habits for achieving mastery later in life. We will tap into his deep well of wisdom on everything from mountain biking safety to training at an elite level despite a late start, to habit stacking for continued self-improvement, to savoring each moment in the wondrous outdoors. And hey, what's harder, a running marathon or a mountain biking marathon? Tune in. Whether you are a diehard shredder or just looking to get more active, Matt's hard-won insights will spark your inner flame and motivate you to get after it. Lace up those boots and get stoked. It's time for an inspiring download from the ageless mountain biking phenom, Matt Eggleton. I really appreciate you tuning in, friends. If you like this show, please subscribe so we can continue bringing the goodness right to your favorite podcast. Matt, great to have you on the show. To start off, can you please tell us where are you right now, where are you from, and what did you have for breakfast today?
Hey, Kush. All right, Matt Eggleton. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside D.C. in the D.C. metro area. This morning, I had the same thing that I have almost every single morning for probably the past 7 or 8 years. I have some form of oatmeal. So today's oatmeal was a third cup of organic rolled oats with half a banana and a handful of blueberries and a little dab of maple syrup. And a cup of coffee with a scoop of collagen.
Got it. I have a very similar breakfast myself. I sometimes, instead of the maple syrup thing, I'll add some kind of nut butter.
Yeah.
All of us need a good breakfast to fuel our day.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. Matt, you have tackled some pretty brutal endurance races.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've experienced out on the course?
Gosh, I think, crazy things. I might have to come back to this if something later on sparks. But I think that the craziest thing is, I've been in several races where I have mentally quit multiple times in the race and then ended up finishing and doing very well. For example, in a 100-mile mountain bike race, you might have 5 or 6 aid stations, and I'll get not even to the first aid station, and I'll say, today's just not my day. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling motivated. I don't know why I do this to myself. And I'd say, okay, I'm just going to get to the first aid station, and and then I'll ask for a ride back or something. And then I get to the first aid station and take a breath. I'm okay. I'll go to the next one, and then I'll go to the next one. So I can think of, probably 10 races or more, but this is probably half the time this happens, where it's a mental challenge more so than a physical challenge. And so I think that's probably a familiar scenario for people who do ultra endurance racing. But it's what makes it especially interesting and especially rewarding when you complete it.
I'm just learning about the world of ultra endurance mountain biking. I've heard about it for many years, and I'm completely fascinated. Would love to learn a little bit about what is the mountain bike race world all about. What are perhaps the different kinds of races out there in terms of distances, categories, which ones might be the most sought after, and then also what is a normal mountain bike race versus, let's say, endurance race versus an ultra endurance race?
Okay. So I would say there's probably three primary forms of mountain bike race. Well, I should say 3 primary forms of endurance mountain bike racing. Of course, you have outside of that, you have, like downhill racing. We call it gravity sports. So it'd be like downhill racing or enduro, where you do a downhill and then you shuttle to the next downhill and then you do another, and it's timed, like those downhill sections are timed in between the shuttles. But in what I would say traditional mountain bike racing, you have what's called cross country. Olympic style cross country generally is an hour and a half long mountain bike race. So you're on red line the whole time, just pinning it full gas for an hour and a half, something like that. And those are exciting. I mean, in fact, that is an Olympic sport. And so one of the people that I would consider a friend and a mentor, Tinker Juarez, was at the very first Olympics in Atlanta when the mountain biking was introduced as an Olympic sport. Besides Olympic cross country, then you would have what we call marathons. So generally, Olympic XCO, marathons XCM. Those are generally 50 miles, 100K, something like that. And each of these becomes kind of a gateway drug to the next. Okay. So people often enter, these hour-long events. They can visualize themselves doing that. Mountain bike marathon of 50 to 100K is, going to be a good bit longer, maybe 4, 5, 6 hours, depending on, the amount of elevation. And so you might have somewhere between 6,000 feet of climbing to as much as maybe 9,000 feet of climbing in a 100K race. After that, generally is upper echelon would be the 100-mile racing. And was really, really popular in the, say 2010 to about 2020, COVID, that took all racing, in fact, all outdoor sports, I think really took a big hit from COVID. But it has recovered to some, and there's still a lot of 100-mile mountain bike races every year, primarily here in North America. And then there are some like epic events. There are some stage races where you might be out like Tour de France is a stage race, right?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that explainer. Helps me and others get a little bit of the speak into this world of mountain biking racing. Mm-hmm. What is the type of racing Matt, that you specialize in? Are you more of an all-rounder? But my sense is you go for like the long, gnarly ones. And maybe how did you find yourself there?
Yeah, this is a progression that a lot of people experience. But how I got into it, pretty much the same way most people get into it. My daughter bought a bike with her own money, saved up her own money, bought herself a mountain bike, thought it was cool, wanted to do it, rode around the neighborhood, some local trails, and then encouraged me to join her. I had been a cycling commuter years prior. And so I was, I'd kind of stopped doing that and taken up other pursuits, but it was a great opportunity to spend time with her. So of course I did. I really fell in love with it very quickly. And like a lot of us adventure sports people, became obsessed with it. And I was learn as much as I can and be on every internet forum and group that I could find. And, but then not long after that, maybe 3 or 4 years, she went off to college. We found ourselves as empty nesters. I had all this extra free time, right? Because I'm not shuttling her to her activities. And I just filled the gap with cycling and training and signing up for my first event. And I was living in Germany in Stuttgart, Germany, when I just finally decided I'm going to be in my first mountain bike race. Did that. So not only was I, exploring a new sport, but I'm exploring a new sport where the whole registration and everything is in a different language, but, navigated my way into that and did my first 2 mountain bike marathons while I lived there also. And so that was, again, it was kind of a gateway into, I knew I'd be coming back to the States, and I, through YouTube and whatever, had discovered that there is this whole community back in the States for when I move back, I want to get involved in. And that's exactly what I've done.
I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one-size-fits-all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode. Little did you know that when you introduced that bicycle to your daughter, that in this brilliant turn of events, it will come back to you.
It's a big part of my life. I mean, it's a big part of my identity. I made a post about that yesterday. I signed up for one of our, very prominent races. And the post was, it's because it's what I do. This is what I do. I sign up for things that are scary and hard. I mean, I've done this race many times before. I know I can do it, but it's very, very difficult. It takes a real commitment to prepare for it, especially if you want to do fairly well or do better than you did last time.
Great. Many nuggets out of that I want to tap into later. One thing immediately is just your journey as you progress through the world of mountain biking. I mountain bike a little bit myself. I don't aspire to race competitively, at least. What happened first? Did you start mountain biking recreationally and at some point you realized you had the talent? Or is it that you were competitive in other sports in your life, and this was like some sort of coming together of worlds. Where does this begin?
It's definitely the latter, because I would be very quick to point out I don't necessarily come with a lot of talent. I did not. I wasn't very lucky in the gene lottery. Any success I've had is, I think, through determination, maybe even persistence. Yeah, I was competitive even as a kid. I was always competitive, playing street hockey out front. I grew up in Western New York in Buffalo, so basically football and hockey culture. So played a lot of those kind of sports growing up. Again, wasn't particularly good at any of them, but they really always interested me. And I think I was more of a frustrated athlete than anything else. I competed in some other endeavors in between then in cycling. But I found that if I worked hard, I guess, again, would have been in the first couple of years, I found that if I rode regularly and if I kind of put a little bit of structure and rhythm and routine into this, that I was quickly becoming more capable than some of the people I was riding with, just again, through frequency of riding 3 or 4 times a week. And it's like anything you practice, the more you do it, the more you're going to get better at it, right? I've found success, a little bit of pride, a little ego boost, right? And started to formulate and integrate this into my identity. So that right, we pursue things where we feel we've been rewarded to some degree, right? If you get to your first gold star, I want another gold star. I want another, And so a little bit of success resulted in, more interest, which resulted in a little more success and more interest.
One of my favorite maxims is success breeds success.
Sure.
And it's kind of like my favorite class in high school was history. And it was because I had this great history teacher and I had little, I think, interest initially, but she was just so encouraging and she kept complimenting me on how well I was doing at class. Somehow I just became really interested in history and I ended up doing really well with the subject. So for sure, it's good to feel one is getting some rewards to keep pushing us to the next milestone. How old were you, Matt, when you started mountain biking?
So that's a good point. I would definitely a late adopter, right? So I was in my 40s, I guess. Yeah, I would have been. So this really took off for me in 2009 or 10. I'd have been well into my 40s, maybe 44, 45. Yeah, I just grinding away since. And again, no end in sight. Can't envision not participating in this. So,
Matt, I can just see the fire in your eyes as you said the last thing. And how old are you now?
So I'm 58. I'll be 59 this season. As cyclists, we often refer to my race age. My race age is 59.
So you're 59 years young, and you started mountain biking in your mid-40s. And it's funny how, since I've started this show, I am meeting more and more, let's say, remarkable seasoned athletes who, contrary to first impressions, started their sports journey at a later age by conventional standards. The thing that is, I think, badass about what you're doing is, as somebody who's dabbled in mountain biking, I know how difficult of a sport it can be. It is an enthralling sport. And I remember taking a little class. I hired somebody to teach me some basic skills, jumps and whatnot. I started this over COVID, and he was this young buck, maybe in his late teens. I just found him on some forum, and he was trying to be patient and helping me learn how to navigate this, in my opinion, blue-black type of downhill. And it was scary and it was hard. Yeah. And I realized I don't have a particularly extreme bent of mind, even though, yes, in some ways I do conventionally extreme sports. But I was talking to him and then I talked to other people, and I started thinking that this is one of those sports like gymnastics. You have to acquire those technical skills and the muscle memory and some of those fundamentals early. But you are breaking my thinking here.
See, if I were coaching you, it's through that blue-black trail, I would just take you through it 3 times a week, every week for 10 weeks. It just, as you become more and more familiar with it, it's less and less scary. I was in a race this past Sunday. There's what I think is a fairly technical downhill section with a lot of loose rock. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you could get hurt really bad. And the first time I rode that was during a race, which is just nuts to ride it blind on a race day. And it scared the dickens out of me. And I ended up like walking down most of it. And other people that I knew that I was equally skilled or experienced with, they came, bombing through there. And the difference was they'd been down it multiple times before. And so I think for me, the development of those skills and overcoming of fear is just through not necessarily repetition, but through experience. Just doing it and things like it more and experiencing it over and over, making it become familiar. Right, we're scared of things we don't understand or we haven't seen before. And the more you become familiar with it, the less scary it is. And hearing me say this to myself out loud is kind of coaching me to, I have this constant reminder that I need to ride technical terrain more frequently so that I am more familiar with it, more comfortable with it. And I think, like a lot of people, I end up resorting to what's most convenient. And, that's just breaking out the road bike and going down the cycling path and, going over to the park and whipping around 4 times and coming home. When, in fact, what'll make me a better mountain biker is to ride my mountain bike more, right? And so it sounds so simple, but familiarity, I think, is key.
It is indeed true that some of this becomes self-fulfilling prophecy as we get older. People tell us, or we start thinking that we shouldn't be doing something because we're older and we can acquire those skills. And then the less you attempt those skills, the harder it's going to become for us to get good at them. So I certainly do want to tap into some of your learnings as a coach now. Mm-hmm. But going back to some of your beginnings, Matt, did you find a coach for yourself or were you self-taught?
I would say I was mentored by some very, very patient people. And, the difference between a mentor and a coach is that, a mentor will share what they have learned, whereas a coach will help you discover. I come from a very formal coaching background. Before, outside of athletic coaching, I come from a leadership and performance coaching background. I do this at work as part of my job as well. When I say coaching, I think of it in the leading somebody through the discovery process and problem-solving process. I had some really solid mentors and very patient people who were willing to teach me and go through that learning and familiarity with me and early in my mountain biking. And again, I think it was slow, right? It was just a lot of just riding the bike on gravel paths in Germany, which are everywhere. A lot of Europe is just laced with these, fire roads and how they manage the forests, right? Let me circle back on another point that you made. You discover how folks in their 40s start picking up sports and all this. I really believe this has to do with often becoming empty nesters or children becoming more independent. And it frees up a lot of time. People in their 40s, 50s, I think, have a little more flexibility in their schedule. They got a couple more dollars in their pocket, a little bit more disposable income. These are now my talking points that I try to put on to race directors all the time, that you really need to have more categories for 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus, because you put those categories there, people will want to come and participate. And you don't need to give them prize money. You just need to give them the opportunity to have this experience. Again, it might be simply there's 3 women that show up in the 50 to 60 category. Great. Let's give them the opportunity to experience that, stand on the podium, take the picture, they post it on their social media, and what a rewarding experience that is. And far too often, that opportunity is not there. I went off on a rant.
It was not off tangent. You are right where the meat of this show is, which is about inspiring us to continue doing these things and to chase dreams, which others may not think makes sense. Ageism, I think, is certainly a part of society.
Absolutely.
I think that perhaps things are changing now because maybe in more mainstream sports, you do see athletes continue to excel at a later age. In some of our niche sports, it's maybe slower to come, but there are people setting an example, people such as yourself and others. I just think that people will see athletes do well in their 30s and 40s, but the recognition and the acceptance, like opening up categories for like the 50s, 60s, 70s, I think those are yet to come, but hopefully those things are coming.
Mm-hmm.
Going back into your race career, Matt, so let's see, you picked up biking, became obsessed in your mid-40s. So now you're maybe about 15 years or so into mountain biking. Love for you to share some of your apex moments.
Okay.
And mountain biker, whether it's racing, absolutely in your racing, but maybe even outside of racing.
Okay. So my first mountain bike marathon was a milestone for me because I, completed the first one I attempted. That was.
And sorry, is the marathon again? Is it in the same vein as running? Is it like 26 miles?
There's a lot of online debate. Which is harder, a running marathon or a mountain bike marathon? It's all. I might argue that a mountain bike marathon is far more difficult because it takes far more attention and far more focus for probably twice as long. A runner would say, well, running a marathon is very difficult on your body. Anything once you pass that mile 20 point, it's extreme mental challenge, extreme difficulty on your body, and it's a test of will. I think those are the same in our sport as well. They're different, but mountain bike marathon is typically 50 miles to 100K. So I did my first one in Munich, Germany, and then I did another one that same year. So now I did 2 in 1 year. And then that would have been 2013 or 14. And then I did a couple more. And then next thing I know, I've done maybe like 8 a year. And this is now 2017 or so. And in fact, in 2016, I did my first 100-mile mountain bike race. But apex accomplishments generally happened in 2019. I had a very successful year. I compete in this series called the National Ultra Endurance Mountain Bike Race Series. And it's a series of about 10 events across North America. This year, there's one in Spain as well that's included in the series. For years, it was if you take your best 4 finishes of that series, and then you were, ranked. And so in 2019, I finished 3rd nationally in the Masters category, which was 50 and up. And very pleased with myself with that result. I also won a gravel race out in Montana that same year. That was an interesting race and probably as difficult as any mountain bike race I've ever done because it was a 57-mile race, but the first 40 miles of it is one single climb. So it's a 40-mile climb. Then
Whoa.
Then it was 12 miles to descend that same amount of elevation. And then it was 5 miles on the flat. So it was 40, 12, 5. So yeah, 40 going up, 12 going down, and 5 to finish. So 57 miles. It's called the Tour de Gravely. It's out of Ennis, Montana. It's part of the Greater Yellowstone Adventure Series. So not only did I win the Masters category, but I won the overall. I was the first one across the finish line. So that was really, really exciting. 2019 was my banner year. And like we talked about earlier, success breeds success. I was all geared up, full go, all chips in for 2020. I had made all kinds of logistics plans. I had bought a lot of new equipment. I had really prepared myself mentally very well, and coming into the 2020 season. And then went to my cycling camp out in Tucson, had a great experience out there in March. And maybe within 3 days of coming back from that cycling camp, the world just turned upside down.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing. It's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this.
Very nice. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mountain biking, again, is such an interesting sport. I'm trying to put myself in the picture of a mountain bike racer. Like I said, I mountain bike a little bit myself, very recreationally. And it's such a technically demanding sport. When I do some other, let's say when I go maybe for a run or a bike, I will have my headphones on, listen to music or podcast. I found that I could not do that at all. You have to be so focused. So now you're racing in these insane long courses like the one you described, and even longer. You have to keep your focus on, you have to, look out for your physical needs, also for bikers around you.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
How do you manage the couple of things I want to ask you about the situation? So one is managing some of the physical risk that comes with mountain biking.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, are you scouting some of these trails? Are you figuring out, where you should navigate, how you should navigate? That's one thing. Secondly, I want to ask you, you are not on the trail yourself. Are crashes normal? Like, are you crashing into people? How do you avoid those things? If you get my drift, that's kind of what I want to understand is like, what happens with managing some of these aspects?
If some of my cycling friends see this, they'll say, "Oh yes, he crashes." Because for a year, I crashed almost every ride I ever went on. And in fact, I think there were years where I had at least one crash in every single race. Now, knock on wood, I haven't had any significant crashes this year, but I definitely became familiar with the emergency room, a lot of broken ribs. And I had a really bad concussion. Well, I've had 2 really bad concussions in the past 10 years. I think it comes through preparation and familiarity, and that develops confidence because, like you said, we are weaving through the forest, and every single tree is reaching out and trying to grab your handlebar. Every rock is trying to slip its way underneath your rear wheel to kick it out. Every route is slippery or trying to grab your pedal. I've had that happen where you're pedaling and a route that's up off the ground will just grab that pedal and it's like a plane landing on an aircraft carrier. It just arrests you and you'll just go. You'll just fly right over the bike. Yes, there are people and there are occasionally, little bumping or rubbing, with single track trail is typically very narrow. That said, there's a lot of courtesy in mountain biking. There's a lot of etiquette. It'll come naturally if anybody is thinking about pursuing this and I don't really know what the etiquette rules are. It'll come natural. You just want to be courteous. So what happens to me very frequently is someone will come up on a long descent and say, "Hey, can I get by?" Yes, just a moment. Let me find a wide turn and I'll go extra wide. You take the right, I'll get in on it. And so there's not a lot of that especially in the longer events. In the shorter events, there's maybe a lot more aggression. And there's a little bit more of like maybe leaning into somebody next to you and things like that, which again, through experience, you just become comfortable with. To your points about like danger or risk of injury and all that, I guess I don't find it much different than many of the other things we pursue. We live in a dangerous world, right? We get in a car and drive 70 miles per hour down a highway all the time, and we don't think anything of it, but we know that's one of the most common ways people are killed all across our country. We eat food that we don't know where it came from, people get ill from. So I think you have to kind of categorize and weigh the risk, and then calculate, is this risk I'm not willing to take? And I think experience definitely reduces that as you become more familiar with what the risk is and how to manage it. But you had another point about concentration. I find that there's a lot of transferable skills between the work I do in the office, managing, whether it be managing budgets, managing people, managing projects and deadlines and things like that, and as well as just having all those things going on simultaneously. In a mountain bike race, I have many things going on simultaneously. I'm trying to apply a certain level of power, wattage, into my pedals. At some given point, I want to keep an eye on my pace. I want to keep an eye on where my competitors are, people that I'm targeting to compete with. I want to keep an eye on my surroundings, like, is there someone coming up on me? Am I coming up on somebody? So you're managing several things simultaneously. And I think of these skills, or again, I've used this word 100 times already today, familiarity, it becomes that chaos becomes familiar. You learn to prioritize and to single out what you need to focus on in this moment, and let the rest of it kind of trust yourself and stay in that flow.
Incredible indeed how with practice and discipline, one can make very difficult things seem reasonable. This three-dimensional world that is mountain biking, indeed, with all kinds of hazards, but which also make for a very compelling experience.
Yeah. Let me interject one thing, and try to soak in some of the beauty and wonderment of being outside.
Yeah, I want to actually double down on that in a second. One kind of a bit of a pedestrian question here is, with some of my mountain biking friends, this question comes up about protective gear we should have on our recreation rides. I will go out with a simple, MIPS helmet, I think. And then sometimes I'll wear pads, sometimes I won't wear pads. I want to ask you, what kind of protective gear do you have when you do this riding? What kind of protective gear did you either embrace or discard as you progressed through the stages?
Okay. MIPS helmet, very important. For those that aren't familiar, MIPS is a technology within a helmet that is like a shell inside a shell. So when your head hits the ground and twists, the helmet will twist and your head doesn't necessarily. The helmet costs $200 or more. Only spend on a helmet what you think your head is worth, right? That's a no-brainer. You got to have a MIPS helmet if you're going to be pursuing mountain biking seriously. Other protective gear, gloves, I'd really think is absolutely mandatory, and it has to do with crashing more than anything else. Anybody that's crashed a mountain bike with bare hands will tell you want to have gloves on. That's generally it for me. Now, when I go out, like I say, scouting a new course, there are some, for example, the USA Cycling Mountain Bike Marathon National Championship in 2021 and 22 was on a course not too far from here in Maryland, Gambrel State Park. Very technical terrain, very dangerous. During the national championships, several people got injured very seriously. Way more technical and challenging than so I went out with knee pads and elbow pads, the first several times that I wanted to learn my way through the course, learn the lines I wanted to take, and become familiar with it. The first time I raced it in 2021, I did wear knee pads and elbow pads, and I think I was the only one. And I'm like, okay, so if this is what gives me the confidence to ride as fast as I can, as hard as I can, as long as I can. And then in the second year, I had shed them by that point. I didn't have knee pads or elbow pads, but I think for anybody starting out and you're learning a new course and trail, knee pads, elbow pads absolutely makes sense. You will fall. Again, it's just part of the deal. It's like saying, you're not going to fall playing soccer. You're not going to fall playing football. You're going to fall. It's essentially part of the sport. Doing it smartly, minimizing it, and are important aspects of it, but it's going to happen. So yeah, helmet, knee pads, elbow pads, gloves, and then proper shoe, I think is important also. I see a lot of beginners not wear a good shoe. And when I say good shoe, meaning with a stiff sole. And that's not so much protective gear. That's more about just pedaling efficiency. That is to have a very stiff sole. If you go out there in your running shoes, with a very flexible sole, you're not going to transfer power efficiently into the pedals. Something like a skateboarder shoe, or the old school Chuck Converse, or Converse Chuck Taylors, something like that with that stiff sole is even a better beginner shoe than a running shoe. As silly as that sounds.
Yeah, I have these climbing approach shoes made by 510.
Sure,
and
yeah.
I think 510 also makes mountain biking shoes. And I looked at those shoes and I'm like, they're really similar. So I just do double duty with my approach shoes.
Probably fine.
Good. Where I am, I think they're totally fine. What about a full face helmet as compared to what you wear? I'm guessing for racing days, it probably doesn't make sense.
I don't really know the full logic of, like many sports, you just kind of have what's the norm, and it's just not the norm in our sport to wear a full face helmet in downhill racing for sure, where you're really likely to get hurt bad. Then yeah. I think this might also be a function of, breathing and whether you run the risk of your eye protection getting foggy. That's another safety eye protection period. No matter what, there are a few folks that'll ride without eye protection of some kind, but I've graduated to the point to where I generally ride with contacts, but I'll still wear eye protection. But getting back to full face helmet, there are some, they have even some that are convertible where like the bottom part snaps off. And I have a friend that wears those, and he has it kind of like tucked in his pack or something, and then for a real nasty long descent, he'll put that on. That gives him the confidence, that he can maybe, be slightly more aggressive. Whatever you can do to instill confidence is a positive thing, right? And feeling safe is going to instill confidence.
Yeah, can't say those words, too many times. Whatever one needs to feel confident
Right.
and feel safe,
And
and
that's
maybe
the right answer.
or on the side of being conservative
That's the right answer.
Probably a good idea. Now, this thing that you briefly mentioned it, which I'm really excited to ask you about, is it is such a demanding sport on the body and the mind and the training and the grueling intensity of like these super long enduro races. What is it that keeps you coming back for more? And after all that training, hundreds of hours of like work, what do you get out of it? You talked about the natural element, so would love for you to talk about that as well.
Anybody that studies wellness recognizes being outside is super important, right? Just breathing outdoor air is important. Getting some sunshine on your face is important. Putting yourself in a new environment or a relaxing environment, unplugging, that's all goodness, right? All that said, I don't necessarily do this for the purpose of getting outside. I think it's a bonus. I will go back to the competitive thing. That's not something it's just within me. That's just part of who I am. But what brings me back every year, I think, is largely the people, largely FOMO, fear of missing out. But I think the biggest thing is honoring my ability and capability. And I'm able to do this. Therefore, I'm going to do it. There will be a point where I'm not able to do this anymore. And that could happen this year, that could happen next year. But while I'm able to do it, I feel a need, again, to honor that ability and that good fortune that I've gotten to this point in my life and have some resources to enable me. So I feel an obligation to myself and to the others who have helped me get to where I am to follow through with this, to continue to follow through with it until I can't anymore. It's almost an unselfish honoring, even though one of the external people is myself. One of the people that I'm honoring is myself, and I'm not even sure how to unpack that.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe, you will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
It does actually make sense. You have this calling, and there is this need to respect that calling. And
respect is a big part of it. Yeah. It's a respect for. I talk about this in my coaching all the time. Is respect for yourself is the root of any degree of confidence and success. Is based on respect.
We spoke about your racing journey a bit yourself. And besides racing for yourself, you are also a coach. You coach other athletes. Do you think you are more talented as a coach or as an athlete? I think you mentioned you bring a background of training from your regular career.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing those aspects help your coaching in some way. And then do the two inform the other? So your athletic performance and your coaching.
Yes to all of that. So let me tackle the talent one first. I definitely think I'm a more talented coach than a talented athlete. And I think a lot of that comes from some of the things you mentioned earlier is I am curious and introspective, and I genuinely want people to succeed. I want you to succeed. I want anybody who lives near you to succeed. I want all of us to succeed. And I do see it as my responsibility to help in whatever way I can, as much as possible. I think I'm more talented as a coach. It is becoming an increasing percentage of my life every year. There's only one pie, and there's multiple different slices, and the size of each slice changes every year, right? I do spend more time on coaching and preparing for my coaching sessions each year. I'm spending more time with that, as well as developing training plans that are available, that I make available. Circle back to the original part of that question, because I find myself as an athlete making mistakes that I think most coaches would pick up on immediately. Generally, overtraining is my most common athletic mistake. Training for the wrong reasons. Not necessarily training to get better, but training so that I can accrue more miles per week and kind of, again, put the gold stars together than really what is best for my body. Maybe not get the rest that I need. Maybe put too many things on my plate that, a coach would recognize. So yeah, I think my coaching then helps me regulate my athletic pursuit, my cycling. Maybe it's too late, but I often find myself making errors and then correct and adjust. For sure, my experience having raced in a lot of places, in a lot of different formats, helps in the coaching as well. But I think I have a lot of my work experience helps in the coaching also. And it's because I've been a supervisor of dozens and dozens of people, maybe 100 people over the years. And I work on problem solving with them all the time. And you have to listen, you have to engage, you have to treat each circumstance as a unique issue. And so I generally think I do a pretty good job of focusing on the issue at hand and being creative in resolving it. There are many aspects of what's going on in my work life, my coaching life, my athletic pursuit, my family life. I think they all inform each other. The trick is to optimize, right? And the challenge, I should say, the game is to how to get them all to synchronize just right, so that they're all they're all supportive of each other. And this is the big challenge that I end up coaching a lot of people through at work, is the work-life balance challenge. And, and I think I like to reframe it as just life balance. You have many things in your life to balance and to synchronize. And I use this meaning like gears. You have many things to get lined up with each other so that they can be supportive of each other. A lot of this comes through developing habits and routines. Using different people have different methods. I like structure and calendars and lists and and what we call habit stacking. Do you know what that is? Where you have maybe a habit and then you associate it with another habit and which you're trying to develop. Those kind of things are all part of my life, but in different aspects.
Thanks for elaborating on that. Habit stacking and structure, those become important when one is trying to juggle many things. What are some things you've learned in your own training, as well as training others, on what works well and what does not work well, especially for older athletes? For example, you mentioned overtraining. So that could be one thing. You mentioned the importance of structure. Just diving a little bit deeper into the actual training, even to the point of understanding what is the balance between training on the bicycle versus training off the bicycle.
We often focus on the training when the training is a means to the end, right? We don't spend enough time formulating exactly what the end is. I've adopted this formula of envision, plan, prepare, execute. And so the envision part, I think, is the most important part. And it's envisioning what you want to be, or envisioning the outcome that you want to pursue. And as part of that exercise, I ask people to close their eyes, think about that goal, think about that end, think about the next day after they've accomplished it, and what do they feel? Where do they feel it in their body? How does that make them feel? And then we hold on to that for a little bit. And so again, this works at work as well. You know, I want to get promoted. I want to balance my budget. I want to reconcile my books. I want to resolve this conflict with my boss. Each of those objectives, I pursue it as an end. That next day, once you resolve this, how does that feel? That helps you gauge what you're willing to do to get there. If the feeling is, well, you know what, maybe that wasn't such a big deal that I resolved that, then that helps inform what you're willing to do to get there. But if it's going to be a life-changing, a very, very satisfying result, that we want to emphasize the importance of achieving that, then ask yourself, what are you willing to do to get there? You know, and then we start developing a plan to get to what we've envisioned. Once we develop that plan, then we have to prepare along the way. And that in that preparation is training ourselves, equipping ourselves, and simulating some of that experience. And then you go ahead and step off and execute that plan, and it becomes self-executable. Once you have practiced and trained and equipped yourself to pursue this. So that structured approach of envision, plan, prepare, execute, I think is applicable to any goal-oriented pursuit. And again, in cycling, like any other sport, we spend so much of our time focused on the training methods. And we could talk about that in a minute, but really having a clear understanding of what you're trying to do will help inform what you need to put in place to get there.
That matrix that you laid out.
Envision, plan, prepare, execute.
Absolutely. Maybe we can do a tiny bit of role playing.
Sure.
So let's say somebody comes to you and they want to participate as a new mountain biker in a 50-mile mountain bike race. How would you begin with laying down their training plan? The mountain bike race could be, let's say, give it like 6 months down the line.
So again, I would start with, why is this important to you? And, you know, why do you want to do this? And, you know, I don't know how much you want to role play here.
I love mountain biking, and the idea of experiencing a race and seeing what I'm capable of could be really fascinating for me to explore. And I love having these long-term goals and working towards them. But ultimately, it comes back to the love of mountain biking, the love of a challenge, and what it allows me to. So maybe I think people in the running world do this a lot. You know, they join like let's do a marathon club, and then we prepare for a marathon together. And for me, mountain biking is fascinating, and that's where we begin from.
Yeah. So there, and interestingly, there are opportunities to train as a group for so like a running club. There are smaller clubs, not as common as there used to be, but that would train together. It was interesting to hear you say, I've got 6 months to prepare for it, because, what you've done is immediately put a limitation on, the time we have to plan and prepare. I wouldn't say that that's a problem, other than let's explore what we can really get done during that time, and be open to the idea that if this goes well for you this year, you might want to do it again next year or 6 months after. And so, in fact, what you experience at this race 6 months from now might be even a greater experience if you then, a year from now, have a personal record, so that you do better even. With endurance sports, I think you'll find that it's often a multiple year pursuit to achieve, I don't want to say to achieve your goal, but to achieve some level of satisfaction. It depends on the goal. It really depends on the goal and what it means to the person and how important it is. And it generally falls back to the why. Why is this important to you? And again, I don't ever try to put somebody on the spot or make them uncomfortable, but I'm asking that of the person so that they can hear themselves say it. It's not because it matters to me. It's not going to impact, my life, other than it helps inform how I help prepare you. You telling yourself, by telling me, you hear yourself explain why this is important to you. That's enormously reinforcing. That ties all that back together and really speaks to your ego, speaks to your identity of who you are and what you're capable of. And that's super, super important.
I really appreciate that. I think being able to clarify that for oneself, because something like this could be quite audacious for somebody who's a beginner, and getting into it for the wrong reasons, or let's say getting into it for reasons that are not very clear to oneself, can probably not be as successful in achieving whatever outcome one is hoping for. So let's say that we are able to go through that process and we come up with all of that, and whatever the articulation might be. One thing about the training, which I think you talked about earlier, which is a little bit maybe different than, let's say, a road race or a slightly less technical. Some of this stuff a lot of coaches are able to operate online these days. Somebody who is still learning how to navigate slightly technical trails, much less try to race down them. Yeah. You mentioned earlier, hey, you would go with me and, you would accompany me until and help me. Is your coaching online entirely, or are you also working with people in person? And let's say, would you take somebody, a remote client, if they are still learning the technical nuances of the sport?
What I specialize in, and I think I'm most valuable to clients, is in coaching them through the goal development and the training plan, which can almost all be done remotely. The actual skills development, I would recommend finding someone who specializes in that. Similarly, without question, this generally will get into the discussion of nutrition. Similarly, I would recommend, I can offer you some things that I think are important and some training approaches that, providing nutrition and hydration during training and on race day, some things that I think are important. But if you're trying to pair this pursuit with losing weight and whatever, I think that's where you want to look for someone who specializes in that. And I know this then starts to unravel into, hey, I need 9 specialized, practitioners to help me with my goal, which really was just about having a good time on a mountain bike. That's part of that discovery and exploration again about what it is we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it. And I want to be clear. I don't think I would ever discourage anybody from pursuing it. What I think we want to do is really gauge what it is and how realistic it is. And if I'm thinking it's maybe not as realistic in the timeline, then I'm going to share that with you, and we will talk about maybe modifying the goal in some way. Maybe you're not doing the 100-mile race. Maybe you do the 100K race, or maybe you do the, hour and a half race and something smaller. Or maybe you do some type of mountain bike adventure instead of a race, but I mean, it would be, again, I wouldn't even necessarily try to talk you out of anything. I think what I would end up doing is helping lead you to your own discovery of what you're capable of on a timeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, I want to circle back on the getting too specialized and having 7 people. You can do this with one coach. I think if you want to have one coach who is going to take you out and, hey, follow me through this line and all that, then you definitely want to find somebody local, right? Like local, like probably like within 20 miles or so. I guess that's really my only point. And there are really, you'd be surprised how many folks really are available. It might become frustrating to, do I just Google cycling coach? That might be the way to start, but there's generally, there's a network to work within, and someone might know somebody, and hey, I know somebody in San Francisco, or I know somebody that knows somebody in San Francisco, or I know a group that you can reach out to. Like finding the right specialist for anything, there's some hit and miss along the way, and it does take some determined exploration. But finding somebody that's compatible with you, that is interested in helping you achieve your goal, is not an impossible task in itself. There are resources out there.
Articulating that goal and the reasons, I think it begins with that step. And maybe second is like that bit of self-assessment of what one needs to get to those goals. And it could be to reaching out to a remote expert like yourself, if you happen to be remote, or it could be somebody else more local. And I think you're right that at least close to most urban cities, there are people out there who can help. I found this person I was alluding to through, I think it was a Facebook group.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a bit of trial and error to ultimately find the right partner in one's journey, like there is with most endeavors. Moving on a little bit, we touched about nutrition for a second. I know, again, that while it's not your specialty, you obviously follow nutrition guidance for yourself. So wondering, what is your diet?
Okay.
What do you like to fuel yourself with?
Yeah, it's interesting you use the D word. I don't use that word unless I think of it maybe with a small d, and it's it's my way of eating or my way of fueling. I guess I'm a creature of habit. So I generally have, as I mentioned earlier, the same breakfast almost every morning, and then adapt it to, if I have a normal work day, I'll have, this much oatmeal with 1 or 2 things on top of it. If I'm Saturday morning and I'm going out on a big ride, I might have this much oatmeal, right? Or if it's race day, I'm going to add some fats in there or something. And then I have almost the same lunch most every day, and which is really just a ham sandwich, a bunch of chopped carrots, and a small bag of nuts that I prepare, which are almonds and walnuts. I generally have a banana about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then I'm on the trainer usually by 4, and or on a bike somewhere before most work days. I'm taking, one of the powdered nutrition fuels. Generally, I'm a liquid fuel only during training and racing. I really don't eat any solid food. Everybody's a little different, but I would generally recommend pushing people towards that methodology if possible. If they can train themselves to go liquid only during long events, there's many benefits to it. That's about it. I don't need a lot of sweets.
Supplements?
Pardon?
Supplements?
I do. I don't talk about this much to a lot of people, but I do.
About collagen, I think.
Yeah. So I take collagen. This was kind of, I don't know if it's a placebo or not, but I'm telling you, my shoulders feel better. I think a lot of cyclists, not just mountain bikers, a lot of cyclists struggle with shoulder health. Of all things, you wouldn't think it, but a lot of it just has to your body position. You put a lot of weight through transfers of your torso through your shoulders. In mountain biking, of course, there's a lot of vibration and a lot of control. And so some people struggle with wrists. I generally struggle with shoulders. I've had a few shoulder injuries as a result of crashes, tears and all that. I find that the collagen relieves a lot of, it's not so much pain relief. It's just kind of, I feel more flexible, and it maybe took 30 days or so, but this has been about 2 years that I've been doing this. It's just one little scoop every day. Other supplements is I do subscribe to, it's called Thorne, THORNE, and it's a daily vitamin regimen where it's two capsules, 3 capsules in the morning and 3 capsules in the evening, and evening one has a little bit of melatonin in it, to kind of aid with sleep. But it's Thorne Research, I think, is the product. Again, I get that through subscription through Amazon, and it's one of those things I do without, I'm kind of mindless about it. I don't even think, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? I don't know. I just do it. I think the times I've missed it, I've not felt myself. So I just continue to do it, and the cost is not prohibitive. I think it's about $60 a month, and saying that out loud does sound expensive, but I just becomes absorbed into my monthly expenses. And I've been taking that for since I think 2018 or 19. And then dinner is usually pretty modest. It's usually some type of chicken or pork and a vegetable, and then a starch like rice. So yeah, a lot of rice, a lot of vegetables, a lot of chicken, a lot of pork. Not so much red meat. Not a lot of sauces, things like that. I'll steal a French fry from my wife now and then, but generally I'm not eating, a bag of French fries, or I'll have a flat pizza now and then, but I'm not a big pizza eater. I have not been in a Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, or anything like that in at least 10 years. I did end up going through an Arby's about a year ago. And it was not a good, I just felt horrible afterwards. And I think it's just, it's not necessarily a choice of good, bad. It's just something I decided I didn't need or want anymore in my life. So I don't, preparing my meals takes a little extra time, but I think it's well worth it. And I try to eat as clean as possible. I just feel better doing it that way. But I'm curious, is there an aspect of my diet that that I've left out? Oh, water, I think, is the other big thing. A lot of water. A lot of water. So pretty much as I can get in me. So I have a water bottle within arm's reach 24/7.
I love drinking water all the time. And about preparing one's own meals, yeah, I think I also do a lot of that. And it's not because there is somebody telling me to do that. I think I just feel more in control. And I also feel that if I eat a greasy me late at night, I just feel awful after that. So I think a lot of it is just me.
Let me riff off that point about control. I think it's reducing anxiety or reducing risk more than necessarily for me being in control. It's for example, if I went to work without a lunch, in the morning, like hoping that I would find lunch somewhere. Now I've added a task. I've added this. I must go hunt and find something to eat. And so not only do I have to find something to eat, but I have to find something to eat that fits within now I have to think about what I want. And so it adds a whole lot of stress and anxiety, and just the thinking about having to do that it's going to enter my thoughts in every meeting I have from 8 o'clock until noon. So I'm going to be thinking about where's my next meal coming from. And I know where my next meal is coming from. It's in my lunch bag. It's on my desk. I think it reduces anxiety and stress to prepare your own meal.
I agree. Some people would call that predictability boring. I find that reassuring.
Yeah. Comforting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Quickly, just changing topics, mobility and cross training.
Yes.
I find as many others, as we get older, our body changes and we have to train and listen to the body differently. Any kind of mobility and body work practices that you have embraced, you have changed. It could be foam rolling, it could be stretching, it could be yoga, it could be lifting weights. What do you do, Matt, to keep yourself in shape when you are on the bicycle?
So I do lift regularly. I lift usually at least once, if not twice a week. And that's primarily lower body. So squats and deadlifts.
Do you go like heavy weights? Do you go for the whole push-pull hinge spectrum?
I'm not working upper. I will tell you, publicly I don't do upper body, but I do now and then, do a set of curls or, a little, I'll pull bench press out, because I've set up a little gym in the basement, but generally it really is focused on the strength training. We'll call it that is, I have a couple different workouts that I do. I have like an A workout and a B workout, right? And so in the A1, it's deadlift and lunges, a little bit of push-ups and things like that. And then the B one is squats with the lunges again. I'm not doing what I probably should be doing, some jumping, box jumps, things like that. I do recognize that probably should be in my routine, but I really do have low ceilings in my basement, so I don't want to, experiment with that. I probably should. It's probably a gap or a blind spot for me. The other thing that I think I'm an advocate of is walking, and this really has to do with using the muscles and connective tissue in your legs that you don't frequently use when cycling. So if you're not going to be walking as part of your job, and I generally work in an office environment, and I don't walk as much as, say, like my wife, who's a teacher, who's constantly walking. I have to do it like deliberately. So my rest day, my religious rest day is generally Mondays. And what I'll often do is cheat my rest day by walking. So I'll go on like a 5K walk around the neighborhood or something like that. And I find that really supplements the cycling work really well. And in fact, for the folks I coach, I do put that in during the last 2 weeks before a race to do some walking, because inevitably in mountain biking, there's what we call hike-a-bike, where the course just gets too steep to pedal efficiently, and you are going to move your bike faster across this terrain by walking it than attempting to pedal it. And so whether that be picking it up or pushing it or whatever, you're going to get it from A to B faster by walking it than you are by pedaling, stopping, getting back on, getting back off, and all that. So in the hamstrings and again, all that connective tissue around your knee, doing some walking, and ideally on trail, because that's really good for developing all that connective tissue around your knees and hips, ankles. But if you can't, around the sidewalk where I live, which are just as uneven as any other trail, is as valuable for you, as hiking on a trail. So yeah, I think walking is super important. Again, it's something that I integrate. It's something I prescribe for the folks that can do it. Now, I do have clients that have, lower back trouble or whatever, and they're like, walking, it just irritates my back. I'm like, cycling doesn't? I'm like, no. And I'm like, okay. If they don't want to do it, if they can't see themselves doing it, then we work around that somehow.
What about mobility and massage? And I ask it because, cycling, you are in that position.
I know.
So long.
There's a lot of people that swear by stretching, No, I don't stretch. I guess if I'm feeling tight, I'll stretch. I used to have a lot of problem with like a sciatica. And so I did this, where you go leg over leg, and then you hamstring stretch, and you would, if you had it in the right, you would put your left over your right and stretch, and that would stretch out that lower right part. And I used to struggle with that, but for some reason I don't have that problem anymore. Maybe it's the college, I don't know, but for whatever reason I don't have that sciatic pain anymore. You know what I do? And I should have mentioned this earlier, is I do a 2-minute plank every other day. So this is one of those habit stacking things that I have as part of my getting ready for bed every other day, as I do a 2-minute plank. So I think that has probably helped to some degree, that lower back and core. And why 2 minutes? Why every other day? I don't know. It's just the habit I've fallen into, and it seems to be sufficient. More probably better, less might be better. I don't know. It's what I do. But, stretching, not so much. When I had the real bad shoulder problems, I used to do hangs from a pull-up bar. I installed a pull-up bar in the rafters in my basement, and would do, a couple of 30-second hangs off of that. And that would offer relief, but all it's really doing is pulling your shoulder joint apart, pulls the humerus away, and so the relief is temporary. And, eventually it kind of settles back in, and would be a problem because I have, like a lot of people, I have a little osteoarthritis developing on the ball of the humerus. So that nips away at the cartilage in there. And again, that this might, I don't know what the relationship is between the collagen and that not hanging anymore, but I don't hang much anymore. But there was yoga. And my daughter swears by yoga. I've done it with her a couple times. It was enjoyable. For me, it's a time sink. That's time I could be sleeping. Sleeping, I think, is for me more important than that. I think sleep is the X factor that is often overlooked in any training plan, because you get stronger during your recovery, right? Not during your training. And the best way to recover is to sleep. There's no substitute for it.
Sleep certainly is often ignored.
Yeah.
Just some final questions as we wrap up here. You have raced competitively for many years, done many kind of races. Any big goal that you have coming up that you are fired up about?
The answer to that should be yes, of course. I have, and this is my A race. So I think the approach in putting together this year's schedule is I was, earlier you asked, hey, what keeps you motivated? Why do you keep coming back? Why? And I was asking myself a lot of the same questions. So I talked about it with my wife, and do I really want to pursue this race series year after year after year? What I've got, for example, I don't know if you can see, I've got these 3 growlers right here. They're from a mountain bike race in Ohio that I did, the Mohican 100. I'm like, do I need a 4th growler? I don't know. Maybe I don't need a 4th. I've done that race like 7 times. When you do the 100-mile version, you get the growler. When you do the 100K version, you get the pint glass. I got cupboards full of pint glasses. Do I need that that reward. And I, decided, no, I don't need that reward. Well, what reward do I need? I want to add some new experiences. So this year I'm doing a race in Butte, Montana that I've not done before, mountain bike race. The long race is the Butte 100. It's a 100-mile mountain bike race. The marathon version is the 50-miler. I'm going to do the 50-miler this year. And if everything goes wonderfully, then maybe I'll pursue the 100-miler next year. Again, this goes back to the, hey, what is your goal and what might be a stretch goal a year from now? I'm going to do the Butte 50 this year. That's in July. That's probably the one that I'm anticipating the most, and the one that really kind of geeks me out, and watching all the YouTube videos and learning as much as I can about. The other one is our, I don't want to say local, our regional big meeting of the tribal, of the group of our people. It's called the Shenandoah Mountain 100. It's in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and it draws folks in from probably 20 or more states. For years and years and years, it really became a destination mountain bike event. And it's one of those that has stood the test of time. I think it's the 24th or 25th running of it this year. In fact, this is the shirt, the Shenandoah Mountain 100. It's just one of those I have to do. It's important. It's important to our community. It's part of my identity. This is what I do every Labor Day weekend. I go to the Shenandoah Mountain 100. It's the gathering of our people. So those are the two big ones, Butte 50 and the Shenandoah Mountain 100. Yes, I get geeked up thinking about both of them.
Many people for their annual holiday weekend would go to a cabin by the lake, and maybe go for a hike, but you are going to do this 100 year after year. That is certainly inspiring.
Yeah.
A couple of fun final questions before we wrap it up. Any habits or routines in the last, say, 5 years that have had the most impact on your life?
It's probably been longer than 5 years. It's probably been 10 years or so, but I think using a calendar sounds so old school, but for me, it is extraordinarily helpful. The calendar I use is not the Google Calendar or whatever. I use Training Peaks. It's software where you plan out your workouts. So, and you lay out your training plan over a calendar, and it's also the software platform that's used for selling training plans as well as developing them and executing them. When you complete the workout, the box turns green. If you complete the workout partially, it turns yellow. If you don't do the workout, it turns red. Okay. But I end up using that Training Peaks software as my calendar. So like I put our appointment today on my Training Peaks calendar. So essentially, this meeting is part of my training plan. My doctor's appointments are part of my training plan. My commitments to go to my wife's concerts as a music teacher are part of my training plan. And so training plan is really just a different word for my life schedule. And it all becomes this interconnected thing. And I just happen to use Training Peaks as my calendar, but it helps me integrate and align and prioritize all the things that I want to include in my life.
It is love and the devotion to your sport, where your default is not, let's say, your regular calendar and the training layered on. It's the other way around, perhaps.
Yeah, it is. It's weird. It's weird because at work, you're beholden to your Outlook calendar, or Google Calendar, whatever. I'll have to bring up on another screen. I have to have my Training Peaks calendar because that's the no kidding ground truth calendar that runs my life. Now, I don't put my work appointment and my work day appointments, on my Training Peaks calendar. But when I need to know, will I be in town that day, or am I taking that Friday off to travel? I consult my Training Peaks calendar, and then that's the ground truth, and then transfer that onto my work Outlook calendar to share with, my colleagues or whatever.
Does the Training Peaks calendar also integrate with, let's say, your training devices?
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as Whoop, Garmin, Whoop, Fitbit, although, I stand on the Fitbit scale every morning and it beams my weight up to the Training Peaks. It's all those interconnected Internet of Things are then captured and cataloged and archived and researchable and studyable, in Training.
In some ways, I learned so much in this conversation, but in some ways, this might be like a top 3 knowledge nugget, which is honestly like fundamentally focus on what's important. And if this is indeed that important, make sure that is the bottom layer over which other things should stack up on. And Matt, maybe just one final question. I don't know how you devour your inspiration, if it's from other sources. Maybe you see movies or you read books. But is there any good movie or a good book that you consumed recently that you would recommend?
When I have free time, between coaching sessions or I had about a half an hour before we got on today, I find myself on YouTube. And of course, so YouTube has its algorithms that present you with what it thinks you think are important in your life. And so generally my YouTube feed is cycling stuff, pro football, maybe some watches, these kind of parts of, my curiosities, so I do end up spending a lot of time watching YouTube videos, on cycling, which are half research, half entertainment, half learning. There's what I would turn people on to a few cycling podcasts that I find especially valuable. If you're open to that.
Sure, please mention them.
Okay. So there's an endurance cyclist named Dylan Johnson who does science-based training, and he's a fascinating guy. He grew up in the DC metro area, now lives in Western North Carolina. He's a really incredible mountain bike and gravel racer that has some really cool content. I recommend his podcast. I'm a dedicated subscriber to that. One that I've recently discovered, and the only spoken don't have much of a relationship with the guy, but I find him inspiring, is a podcast called The Stable Cyclist, Stable. And the topic really is an intersection of mental health and cycling. I think for many of us, especially since COVID, we're learning a lot about ourselves and our mental health that we hadn't really explored before. I think that's an area where we have a lot to learn. And I think we have a lot to learn and then adopt.
Wonderful. Yes, mental health is often not given enough credit. And talking of YouTube, we are also launching a YouTube channel adjacent to this podcast. So we'll hopefully have this delightful conversation with you up on YouTube as well. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing so much with us today.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed it. I think I've probably benefited as much as anybody else has, and anybody that gets something valuable out of this, I'm glad I could help you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Have a lovely evening.
What an incredibly inspiring chat with Matt Eggleton. At 59 and not starting mountain biking until his 40s, Matt embodies the ageless athlete with his fired up energy and his consistency in sending it harder than ever. Throughout our talk, Matt drew from his military discipline to drop wisdom on the mindset, training, and habits for achieving mastery later in life. We tap into his knowledge on workout regimens, habit stacking, and cultivating an appreciation for the outdoors with each hard-won ride. I hope Matt's ability to laugh in the face of perceived limitations motivated you to get out there and pursue your wildest dreams, no matter your age or stage. The greatest adventures await by taking that first step. Huge thanks to Matt for these inspirational truth bombs. Let's chase our passions with the same zest for living fully. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, I would so appreciate if you would subscribe, and I will continue to keep delivering more incredible stories of age-defying outdoor athletes. Until next time, my friends, get outside, stay adventurous, stay ageless.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.